even after I centered my life around what brings me fulfillment, like people in China here are like, we don't understand why you even want to think about coming back here. And I was like, yes, I know. I understand why it doesn't make sense to you because if I only looked at my life around where's the best place to live, China's probably not the answer. But when I think about what brings my life fulfillment and gives it the most meaning, then it makes sense why I am choosing to potentially come back to live in China and build a business in China.
Oh my
And
God.
it's not about the money, it's not about the ideal place to live.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented. Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started. From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented. Do you know the one thing inclusive businesses have in common? They have an inclusion statement. And not just any statement, my friend. It's a personal, authentic statement that takes you on a journey. A statement woven with story that paints such a clear picture of who they are as a human that you can't help but take a step closer to their brand and their mission. I know firsthand what it means to read an inclusion statement where I feel so seen and welcome even before I have spoken to the business owner. That's why I want to teach you the art of putting together a powerful inclusion statement from scratch that will leave your right fit clients with no doubt of what you stand for and how your space is the space that allows them to feel welcome, regardless of how they identify. Now, I've put together two of my in demand workshops, the Inclusion Statement Workshop and the Scholarship Immersion Experience. I'm calling it the Inclusion Bundle, where you only pay for one, but you get both. This is only available for the month of November in honor of Black Friday. If you've ever wanted to create an inclusion statement for your business but don't know where to start, or create a scholarship program to serve those who may not have the access to work with you right now, the Inclusion Bundle is for you. Head over to anikishuru.thrivecart.com/bundle to grab both of these workshops for the price of one. The link is in the show notes. I've just finished recording this session with Liwei Yang, and I feel so inspired. She has just inspired me with her speech, her level of wisdom, and the depth with which she speaks and shares. This is such an extraordinary conversation because we are talking about Li Wei, who is a life coach, introducing life coaching to China, something that she says is unheard of. And she shares the Asian culture and how the self-limiting beliefs that have existed and been cultivated from upbringing get in the way to truly finding yourself and living out your purpose, and how life coaching can come in and be that answer, be that solution, be that guide to helping you get to living that fulfilled life. Liwei has an incredible story, And I want to read a little bit of her bio. And it's a little bit lengthy, so just bear with me because I didn't want to leave anything out. Everything that she shared in her bio is just so important for you to hear because I want you to have an understanding that as we dive into the conversation, you have an understanding of who Li Wei is. And so she passionately inspires the Asian community to courageously look beyond the long-held expectations of their families and culture, and instead turn inward for the answers and changes they seek. With a lifetime of facing and evolving beyond her fears and the first-hand experience of abandoning the prescribed career and life path she was taught to believe she wanted, Li Wei is the living epitome of modern age liberation for Asian millennials. To her audience, Liwei brings a grounded storytelling lifestyle, an unwavering message of hope and enlightenment beyond now centuries of Asian conditioning, and the real secrets every young Asian leader needs in order to bring more gentleness, compassion, and patience to their life's progression than ever before. As an independent neuroscience, psychiatry, and genetics researcher turned technology consultant, product manager, and technical project manager, Li Wei's lack of fulfillment became one of her greatest motivations to seek change. During these two decades of her life, Li Wei has felt distant from her family, and her romantic relationships frequently ended in heartbreaks. These empty and low moments in her life were pivotal forces, which now sees her coach and speak to the Asian community across several continents, empowering them to boldly listen to their intuition, to soften into compassion and kindness for one another, and to live a life more sustainable. You are going to really, really love this conversation with Li Wei. Without further ado, here's Li Wei. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast. I am so happy today to be joined by Liwei Yang. We are connected through our community of coaches, and she is just a human that I have gravitated so much towards. Just the work that she's doing in this space, how she arrived here, the things that she shares on her podcast. She's such a joy. Li Wei, welcome.
Thank you, Annie, for welcoming me. And I am so excited to be in conversation with you and so honored that you have invited me as well.
Oh, I can't wait for us to dive in. There's a lot of juicy stuff that I have for us to talk about, as you would already know. I always begin by asking the question, how did you get here? How did you arrive at the work that you're doing right now as a life coach? What led you here?
I guess it's really following the breadcrumbs because I didn't even know that life coaching existed until a little more than a year ago. And maybe about 7 years ago, is probably when my journey truly started. And I had been following like the prescribed path that everyone is taught, especially as an Asian, get a good job, get a good education, get a stable job. And at that time, I had what many people thought was a dream job. And when I was in that job, I was like, it feels so meaningless for me. I'm not very motivated at all, other than to do the bare minimum to get paid. And that period of time was when I started to think about what's my purpose? What will give my life a little bit more meaning? And then that's when I started my journey. And it wasn't very easy in the beginning because I grew up in a culture and family that kind of has expectations around what I'm supposed to be doing, what kind of job I'm supposed to have. And in the beginning, I just started doing what I was drawn to. Like, okay, I like yoga. Maybe I'm gonna become a yoga teacher. I tried that. It didn't feel quite right. I also learned to be a Reiki healer. And then I also learned psychotherapy. And it was only when I started working with one of the other coaches from the program that both of us went to, Joe Parker, and I was like, wait, I think this is exactly what I want to do. And I was led to life coaching through a friend who I guess listened to a podcast and she's like, hey, you might be interested in listening to this person. And this coach had thousands of episodes, and I was drawn to the one that was Julie Parker and her on the podcast. And then when I heard Julie Parker, who's the founder of the academy we both studied at, I was like, oh my gosh, I really need to get to know this person more. Let me see what she does. And
Mhm.
then within like 2 months, I signed up for the course.
Oh my God.
So that's how I got here.
Okay.
And life coaching was just so different from the other things I tried. It just felt uplifting. It felt very nourishing. And I'm also kind of forward oriented. So then it was amazing because as we both know, it's also where do we want to go? And that's where it's focused.
I'm just thinking of the power of podcasts. And I also can't tell you how many I've listened to that have really changed my thought process, my perspective on things. They've strengthened me. And so podcasts are so powerful. And to hear that that's how your journey kind of got you to where you are now. How then was it transitioning into life coaching and more so from your Asian culture, your background, where some of the things that we begin to unpack in life coaching are not the way we are taught to look at life? And so, what do you think people from your culture misunderstand about life coaching?
Mm. Ooh, there's so many things. I think the first thing is more people know about therapy than life coaching. So when I tell people a little bit like, oh, I help people come back to themselves, get to know themselves, like deepen self-love or break out of unhelpful patterns and fears and expectations, they immediately think that's counseling. And then I have to correct them like, okay, it's actually similar, but then explain the differences between how one is more, I guess, more focused on processing and more about the past. And
Mm.
then life coaching is more about actions and
Yeah.
moving forward. So I have to explain that to them. And I guess here in China, life coaching doesn't even really exist at all. No one has heard of it. And
No one
yeah,
has
I didn't,
had of life coaching in China.
right. I came to China to attend my cousin's wedding, and I found out when I came here this year that no one has heard of it. It doesn't exist. And that's when I was like, wait, I think I need to at least try to bring life coaching to China. But when I even say that I'm a life coach, people are like, what is that? Are you telling us what we should do with our lives?
Hmm.
And there is this mindset of going outside of ourselves to listen for advice and having someone else tell us what to do. And that's what Chinese people and culture and upbringing has been brought up with. Like, respect authority, listen to your teachers, listen to your parents. Other people know best. Other people have walked this road. People who are older know more than us. So we just listen to them. And it's very hard for people to go outside of this norm.
Yes.
So yeah, life coaching doesn't exist. And then I have told them that life coaching is so far from me giving them advice. It's actually me almost training them to be their own best life coaches because they know themselves and they know what they need better than anyone else. And it's just helping them find the answers for themselves.
Oh, I am feeling so many similarities in my own African culture. I'm from Kenya and but have lived in Australia for over 20 years. And it was very much growing up. Your elders knew everything. They knew more about you than you know about yourself. Don't even think for yourself. We will tell you what to do. And you just respect the people who are older than you, your teachers, your caregivers. They're the ones who know it all. And whilst, yes, I can understand where that comes from, respecting people who are older than you and uh, it comes with limitations later on in life. You're not able to think for yourself. You're not able to be independent. You kind of wanting somebody to tell you what to do. And it kind of works against you. So it's so interesting now to discover life coaching and how you can indeed be your own life coach. You can coach yourself out of certain things that you're going through. And what are the benefits that you see from life coaching to Asian culture? I know you've kind of shared a little bit about the misunderstanding, thinking about life coaching as therapy or counseling, and just being in that position of, tell us what to do, and that reverence that is given to people who are older. But what benefits do you see from life coaching to Asian culture? You're thinking of, bringing this to China to introduce life coaching. What are the benefits that you're seeing?
Yeah. Well, I can mostly say this from my own experience and from some of the clients that I've worked with. And I guess immediately, I guess one is the kind of container or the space that a life coach provides. Because when I was first starting out, it was really hard for me to find the support that I was looking for in my family and friends because they don't understand the choices that I'm making. And when someone kind of helps you back the thing that you truly want to create or do in your life, like can help you find what your heart truly wants and doesn't go and say things that make you doubt yourself, then you feel like, oh my gosh, someone actually understands me and
Mhm.
someone's actually encouraging me rather than saying, wait, why are you doing that thing that I don't understand you're doing? And that just makes you just feel so held. And that's something that I haven't really experienced in my culture. So it was really great to receive that through life coaching, this cheerleading, which also from my personal experience wasn't very common too. Like in my household, there was a lot of criticism. There's a lot of, oh my gosh, you could have done that better, or next time achieve the next thing. Like always going for something that's better, higher. And it made me feel like I need to achieve perfection in order to receive validation, in order to be acknowledged, in order to be loved. And when I guess, went into a life coaching space, I was just like, oh, I can just be accepted for exactly who I am. And I don't have to keep trying to do the next thing to have someone even acknowledge what I'm doing. And the other thing that I really felt from life coaching is that in Asian culture, there's this, um, I guess, this mentality of negative emotions should be hidden. You shouldn't talk about it out loud. You can't tell other people that you're feeling that way. And I just felt like I had nowhere to express some of the things that I was feeling, like some of the frustration, some of the sadness, because people are like, just think positively. And when I came into the life coaching space, it was just like, oh, I can just be fully accepted. Anything is possible. There's no judgment. And that was a huge change too. So far, two benefits. One, just having encouragement. Two, feeling like you're able to truly say the thing that you're feeling without having to bottle it up. And the third is just having a space where you feel like you have the opportunity to pursue the thing that you actually want to go after and have someone guide you, support you, ask you questions to help you get there. And it's honestly all driven by myself, which was something that was also foreign to me and a little bit scary initially because like, oh my gosh, I have the say, I have the power, which was something that I had to take back for myself as well.
Ooh,
And just from saying that, just from my own experience, I want to give that to someone else too. So I'm sure that there's other people in China or even other Asians who have the same experiences, many, and maybe they aren't able to find the support. And I wasn't able to for at least 4 years. So now I'm like, I know how amazing it is now to be living the life that I'm living. Of course, there's challenges too, but I just feel like my heart is in a better space. And I want other people to be able to find that for themselves and not go through the difficulties that I've had to go through for years to get to where I am now. Like, I want them to find that support quicker.
sooner rather than later. Oh, Liwei, as you're sharing that, I just had this light bulb moment where, as you described the culture, the Asian culture, which is so similar to African culture in terms of high achieving, and because for us as Africans, we have this poverty mentality, this mentality of scarcity, and the only way you can make it is through obviously having a really good education, getting a really good job, and having the resources to live a good life. And if you don't have that, obviously, then life is just a completely, you failed in life. And as you were speaking, I just had this light bulb moment of when people begin to uh, realize that you exist and what you have to offer and are able to actually allow themselves to go into this journey, how transformational this will be. And I know your focus is very much on millennials, and these are the ones who are curious. This is a generation that is beginning to do things differently. They're beginning to question. They're very much driven by self motivation. They're driven to discover what their purpose is here on earth, what were they created for, and there's a desire to kind of follow in a different path than what has traditionally been offered. And I feel like this is going to be such transformative work, particularly in a place where you say that you people haven't heard of life coaching. And I get so excited of what the future holds for you and what lies ahead because honestly, I think it's just going to be so transformational and just seeing you potentially your name becoming a household name in China for the work that you're doing. I cannot wait to see where this goes. And we had a powerful conversation when I held our calls for the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color call not too long ago. And we were talking about beliefs that have shaped us. And we were talking about upbringing, family, parents, and the things that you yourself have had to unshackle to go through this whole life coaching experience that you've been exposed to. What are some of the things that I know you've mentioned about the misunderstanding and the benefits that you see, but I want to know from a personal perspective, what are some of the things you've had to unshackle to get to where you are right now? And particularly when it comes to those family beliefs that have been instilled in us? What are the things that you've had to like unlearn and begin to free yourself from?
Oh, well, I feel like you teed this up perfectly because you talked about how in African culture there was this mentality of scarcity from growing up or having maybe had a history of poverty.
Yeah.
And I feel that I grew up in that type of environment. Like my parents grew up during the Cultural Revolution. They were born during the Great Famine. There was so much poverty in China during that time. And my parents, grandparents, they really had to like work so hard just to even survive, just to even get food, just to even have clothing. And I feel like that type of upbringing of money is at the center kind of our lives around all, it impacts all the decisions we make. How can we save money? We need to have a good education in order to make more money. That was kind of like the anchor almost of what I grew up in and what my parents taught me. And it made sense for them to have had that mindset from the circumstances they lived in. But I guess times have changed and I have a different kind of life from my parents where there are more resources. And one of the biggest things I had to unshackle as part of my journey is not centering myself around money, but centering myself around what brings me fulfillment.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was, in the past, even simple things like I signed up for a course, let's say, I would get myself to sit through it even though I didn't like it, just and tolerate it, just to get my money's worth,
Yes.
right? And that's the mentality. And then now, like when I took years, but and it was not easy. So much anxiety, so many of the past fears that is held in our bodies because the body knows the score
Yes.
is it just comes up and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so painful. But you have to slowly go through it to release it. And when I then learned to center things around my happiness and fulfillment, then it was like, okay, let's say this course happens. It doesn't really make sense to me to continue this. I'm not actually getting benefits from this. Well, then, all right, let me just not continue because I'm not going to waste my time and it's sunk cost and I'm okay with it. But I value like what I'm getting from it. If I'm not getting anything, it's okay. Or even something simple like before, I would feel guilty. It's also that scarcity mindset. If I spend on things that are pleasurable, like creativity, art supplies, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like not necessary, but it will bring me joy. And I would feel guilty buying those things. And once I shifted my mindset, I'm like, no, I'm gonna buy the thing that's gonna make me happy because it's like a reward unto itself too. When I do something that when I draw and it makes me happy and makes my inner child happy, then I'm gonna be happier too and bring that out into the world. And I don't know, it's gonna create a positive energy loop for myself too. So I just think about things so differently now that what I'm centering my decision and life around is different. And even after I centered my life around what brings me fulfillment, like people in China here, like, we don't understand why you even want to think about coming back here. And I was like, yes, I know. I understand why it doesn't make sense to you because if I only looked at my life around where's the best place to live, China's probably not the answer. But when I think about what brings my life fulfillment and gives it the most meaning, then it makes sense why I am choosing to potentially come back to live in China and build a business in China.
Oh my
And
God.
it's not about the money, it's not about the ideal place to live.
That what you just said, that is just so profound that it's not about the money, it's not about you could live anywhere in the world that you choose right now, Liwei, but it is where it would bring you the most joy, the most fulfillment. And I think just reaching that point in your life where you can make such a decision because we are so driven by what other people think, oh, I'm going to live here because the perception of living here and how that feels and how that looks like. And doing it to live according to other people's standards or other people's measures of success and not necessarily your own that will bring you that inner joy, that inner fulfillment, which is just profound. And all this discovered through that journey of life coaching, was it?
Yes. I mean, part of it was discovered maybe even before life coaching. I mean, I honestly think that the journey we go on, no matter what happens, whether it's challenging, whether we fail, is all a necessary part of our journey. And so, like, I think even for Chinese mentality, because like someone's always there to watch us, there's this fear of failure. And I really had to be okay with doing things that I never tried, but would be okay if it didn't work out. And part of like my 7 year journey to even get to where I am was finding more clarity. Like, okay, I tried that, but it doesn't still feel right to me. Like, I tried living in Taiwan for a little bit of time. I tried living in different cities for a different period of time. I lived in Melbourne for 1.5 months, and it was the most amazing place. Like, if I chose the best place in the world that I wanted to live in, it would be Melbourne. But after I guess like experiencing and just trying different things, I realized, okay, yeah, China's not ideal, but something about this feels right. And and yeah, part of that was the process that I had to go through, even though it was me sitting with lots of discomfort, not knowing the answers, feeling lost for a very long period of time. But I know that for anyone else who's also going through this, it feels so difficult. But when you come out of it, you're like, oh, okay, it makes sense now
Mm.
why I had to go through that. And and even now, like I can feel, okay, yes, China doesn't have everything, but I remember what it felt like to be in a place that I enjoyed, but still felt there was a little bit of emptiness there.
Yes.
And I just have to remember my why almost. Like, why am I here? Why did I come here? Why did it feel good? Why did that not work out for me?
Mm. Mm. You are so wise beyond your years because there are people who live an entire lifetime and a long life, but don't get to that point of realization about what brings them joy, what brings them fulfillment, and just end up chasing the next thing, climbing the corporate ladder, whatever ladder it is that you're climbing to get that significance, that chasing that success that never fully brings out what brings you the most joy. So I just feel like you're so wise beyond your years. And I love the way you're thinking of life. Like, I'll give this a go. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's a lesson learned. And just to sitting in the discomfort, which we all dislike because we live in a time when we want things to happen quickly, instantly. And particularly for us in the online space as coaches, we see we a lot of messages, successful coaches or those who are painting that picture of 6 figure, 7 figure, 8 figure, and thinking that that is the norm or that is what we should aspire to. But there are other things that we can create for ourselves that can bring us a lot more fulfillment and a lot more joy. And so, Liwei, I'm wondering, with this dream of yours to bring life coaching to China, what are you doing to prepare for that? Perhaps what areas you may feel you might even get some resistance, but what are you doing to prepare yourself for that?
Okay, yes. Well, the immediate thing is the logistical aspects, which is I need to get a work visa to really truly work out here. And I've established and registered my business here now, which is great. So there's like the administrative hurdles, I guess you can say, that I have to go through to even be able to start.
Mhm.
But aside from that, because no one has even heard of life coaching out here, I'm also just doing things that I never thought I would do that I've never done before, like start to go out and speak, public speaking, start to tell people about my work, about my niche, about my story. And it's I truly think that when you're doing the thing you're meant to do, you just get so energized because the first time that I spoke in front of people, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so alive and I'm so happy to be bringing this message out. So yeah, right now it's really just about getting people to have awareness of life coaching, of the fact that I even exist in case anyone has been looking for me and haven't found someone who can provide them the support they need. And in terms of resistance, I really think part of it is people are still stuck in the almost like scarcity mindset. And China has actually rapidly evolved within one generation where there's so much abundance now. But I think the psyche hasn't really caught up with the present day circumstances of I don't actually have to be worried that there's going to be financial catastrophe like in the next minute or that I'm not going to have the resources that I need. But yeah, it's like I think one of the biggest things is shifting that mindset so that they can even be willing to be open to working with a life coach or even open to something other than what they feel like their life should be like. Um, that's one of the biggest things. And I haven't quite, to be honest, I haven't quite figured out how to get past that yet. But one thing I do know for sure is that I can trust my intuition. And this is something that I have developed very well over the last few years, where even if it doesn't make logical sense to me. Or even if my emotions are like, no, that's not what I want. I'm gonna cry over this. I'm like, no, I know the voice of my intuition now. And I'm gonna follow it. And I know it's gonna lead me where I need to go. And I don't know like the 10-step or 20-step plan to make this work. It's really just kind of like I mentioned, following the breadcrumbs, which is even how I got to where I am now. It's what's the next step? What feels right? And all of those answers are actually in my body. And that's really what I'm trying to get other people to listen to as well. It's like, okay, no, it's time to wait. Okay, now it's time to go, like that type of thing. So I know that for this journey, just it's like a surrender. Like I have no idea what's coming, whether it's big or small, but I'm just gonna follow it and just trust that that journey that it's gonna take me on will help me grow, like reach my full potential to shed the things I still need to shed or change my beliefs, but also it's always going to be in service to something greater than ourselves too. And I really believe that when we come back to that part of us, it's only going to serve.
Hmm. Absolutely, 100%. I couldn't agree more. Now, I have to ask a question. Obviously, the podcast is called Represented, and we mainly talk about issues to do with racial equity. And I am curious to know, has the issue of race from the perspective of representation influenced you as a coach in any way? Because when you look at our coaching and personal development industry, there isn't much representation of people who are Black, Indigenous, or even people of color. How has this issue of race, being somebody who is Asian, how do you feel about it? How do you feel that how do you sit with it and the representation that is so minimal?
Yes, this is definitely part of why I'm doing what I'm doing too. Because when I went on my journey, I couldn't find a single Asian person who was able to support me. Of course, like, there's some amazing coaches from our academy that I found who are really good space holders, but they don't truly know the nuances of the culture, the family dynamics, the expectations. So when I look at the statistics on coaches, 5% of coaches are Asian. And there's okay, the other statistic is that there's 200 millennials in China and zero life coaches. So I'm like, who is serving this sector of the population? Not even just like Asians outside of China that have access to other types of coaches because they can find them more easily. Um, so it's like finding the right support from a coach who even understands the background, that's been hard for me to find too. And that's part of the reason why I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be that person. I'm gonna learn this thing and learn to be a good coach. But also, China has been, I'm drawn to it because China's behind a firewall. There's no life coaches in China. Like part of my journey that helped me even get to where I am is that at least I have access to Instagram, for instance, and there's coaches and there's resources and people who kind of help you like, oh, that message really resonated with me. And I don't think that people in China do not have access to see those things. And yeah, when I think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to bring some of those messages of support, encouragement into this country. And hopefully there will be more life coaches that come out of this. But there's so many millennials who are in this phase of like maybe even questioning, what am I doing? I don't really want to go down that path, but being able to find the resources and be able to access the resources that they need from someone who understands them or even speaks their language. So yes, all of these things are important. And um, I'm I would say I'm intermediate in terms of my Chinese speaking capabilities, but one thing that has fueled my journey is like this true desire to want to help people to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm willing to get better at Chinese in order to serve this population as well, because they are not being represented by a life coach that can serve them right now.
Ooh, I feel your passion. I can feel your passion just coming through your genuine and sincere desire to be of service. And if there's one thing that, going through that journey of becoming a life coach, if there's one thing that we take away in a big way, or one of the most important principles is to be of service, to serve others. And when you come from that perspective of service, everything kind of lines up for you. And so I can just feel that passion coming through. And as we wind up, Liwei, uh, I always like to ask this question. And maybe the question is more so for me and my personal development and growth. But I would really love to know if fear was not an issue or a factor, how would you show up in your work?
Hmm. Well, okay, the logical answer is that if fear didn't show up, I think I would just do things a lot quicker. But I've really had a long relationship with fear, I would say. In the beginning, I would say for a long time, fear was the emotion that I was afraid to feel the most. I would just pretend that it didn't even exist. Like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna squash you. And over time, as I went through my journey, I have now learned that fear is kind of like my friend. Like, I have done some things where I went way too fast because I didn't pay attention to my fear. And that fear comes from a very primal place within us that has existed to serve us too for a long period of time. And yes, there's some fears that maybe can evolve now that's like based on the past, but I feel like some of that elemental gut feeling of fear is still serving us in some way. And now, whenever I feel fear, I know, okay, I think I need to listen to a part of myself. Maybe it needs something, and maybe I need to soothe myself. Maybe it just needs to be heard. And sometimes that's all I need. It's just like, I need you to hear me because I'm scared. And and then it's like, okay, it's okay now. And I feel like a lot of times we don't even need to change or need to be fixed. We just like something just wanted to be seen.
Mm.
Like we need to be seen. A part of us needs to be seen and heard that hasn't been seen and heard before. But now when I feel fear, I know, okay, I think I need to slow down. I need to go a little bit gentler. I am probably rushing, and I realize that I have realized when I go slower that I bring every single part of myself along
Mm.
rather than like rushing and then having to go back and kind of reintegrate a part of myself that I fragmented and left behind. And I guess a lot of my work has been kind of working with my fear because I think part of this journey and my own conditioning and maybe that of people from your culture too, it's like we're taught this thing. So we believe this one thing, but we actually want to go in a different direction. And it sometimes feels like a conflict is going on within us. And I think part of the work is like bringing that fear along and letting it know it's still okay. I'm still safe. And the only way to do that is to go so slowly and gently so that it doesn't get like the nervous system doesn't get so triggered and old patterns don't show up again. So yeah, now whenever it shows up, I just slow down, which is the most amazing thing to do. Pause, slow down, really even assess, is the direction that I'm still going in the direction that I want to go?
Liwei, you are a phenomenal coach. I'm sitting here listening to you, and you're just sharing from a place of such deep, grounded knowledge. For somebody listening, they might just be like, yeah, 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 yeah. This is no, there is a lot of depth, there's a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of knowledge. And to have you as a life coach would be an absolute dream. So, to somebody listening who might be an ideal client who's an Asian millennial, they're listening to this, and they'd love to connect with you. Is there something, or where do they begin? where do they begin this journey on? I believe you may have some free resources. I came across a beautiful journal that you have prepared, journal prompts. Where do you suggest would be a good place for them to begin to kind of, walk their way through discovering, life coaching?
Yeah, maybe the best place is my website. It is alaliwei.com, ALALIWEI.com, because I do talk about coaching and some other things on there, and I have my free journal prompts. And those prompts I came up with several years ago because when I was going on my journey, I kind of looked at my journal entries to see what am I writing about the most during that period of time. And those are the prompts that kind of helped me get started. So that is one useful resource. And then my Instagram, I occasionally post on there as well. It's tidbits from Liwei. So those are the resources for anyone who's outside of China. And then, of course, because people in China can't access those resources, they don't have access to Instagram, Facebook, like so many things. I have started, this is part of the logistics of getting started in China too. I have started to put some of my content and write things out in Chinese on, I guess the equivalent of Chinese social media. So I have a business subscription account now that people can also find me at, and it's 订阅号, and the name of my account is 纵兴起, and the ID is tidbits dash from dash Liwei. So I have put some resources on that account too for those who are based in China, and I'm continuing to kind of like migrate all of my website information on there as well, slowly.
I will pop those links on the show notes so people are not trying to write this down or memorize this. I will pop that in the show notes so people can just simply click. And we will make this also available to those in China, so that they're able to watch this and even have, captions in Chinese so that people can access that. We're going to try and make this as accessible as possible to those who need this the most. Liwei, thank you so much for this conversation. You are a wealth of knowledge. I feel like you're just this soul who knows, has so much deep wisdom to share. And I could just sit here and just listen to you because I feel like I'm a student. I feel like I'm learning things from you as you speak. So much wisdom is coming out of your mouth. And I am so grateful for this time that we've spent together. And mine is to wish you the very best as you set this off. And please do come again. Let's chat again and see how you're going as you establish this in China. I have no doubt that you have success written all over you, and wishing you all the very best.
Oh, thank you, Annie. And I also want to thank you for giving me permission to show this podcast to people in China. And thank you for your understanding of making this accessible. And I've had a wonderful conversation with you. Thank you so much. And honestly, I'm I'm also learning from everyone around me. So you have also been my teacher, and it has been a pleasure for me to be on this podcast with you.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented. Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata. Represented.